Hi, welcome back. If you're here for more Stormlight Archive content, you're in the right place. In last week's video, I said that this one would be all about Bridge 4, taking a deeper look at just how brilliant Brandon Sanderson was when he incorporated this idea of Bridge 4 into The Way of Kings. So there will be big spoilers for The Way of Kings, but I'm assuming if you clicked this video, you've probably already read it. I'm also assuming that if you're watching this video, you are a Brandon Sanderson fan. Maybe you're a critic, but I think we can agree that there are certain things he does really well. He is good at what he does, but like every artistic genius, he has his strengths and his weaknesses. Generally, it's pretty commonly accepted that one of his big strengths as a writer and storyteller is his world building. He builds big, extravagant worlds that are explained enough to make sense. We accept the reality of these places he makes. Great world building incorporates the world you have built into the plot. You shouldn't have this good plot that just happens to take place in this cool fantasy world. They should be part of each other. And that is something else that Sanderson is really good at. And he takes this skill a step further by not only incorporating his world building into the plot, but by making it fundamentally inseparable from the characterization of the members of Bridge 4, and Caledon specifically. And here are a few reasons why I think that Sanderson's world building was incorporated into Bridge 4 so well. In writing Caledon, Sanderson created this character that would be in a constant struggle and fight against his own depression. This character would have to hit the very bottom and the very lowest place in his life that he could before being able to find new purpose. And I don't know what order Sanderson came up with his ideas for his characters, but it seems obvious that he wanted Caledon to fall in with this group, this band of brothers, if you will. And this group of people is like Caledon's last chance, the last group that he has to care for and fight for, that he ends up saving and forming a tight bond with. So, from a writing perspective, if you need horrible things to happen to your character to create the character arc that you want, having them become a slave seems like a great idea. Caledon, at this point in his life, when he becomes a slave, has already lost people who are important to him. He's already failed over and over again. Now he's a slave, and he's sinking even lower. So really, what worse thing could happen to Caledon and still fulfill the needs of his characterization? Enter brilliance of world building. The very ground, the earth itself, is a plot device for Bridge 4. As I was reading The Way of Kings, it struck me how Caledon's entire journey, at least through book 1, would not have been possible without the world itself being written exactly the way it was. This book is taking place during a time of war. There are constant battles happening, and the ground where the battles happen is full of huge chasms. If you're attacking an enemy on the other side, how do you get across? Well, if you're a Parshendi, you jump. But for humans, the logical way to get across a huge chasm would be to build a bridge across it. However, an enemy army is not going to let you keep your bridges. So, your bridges better be really easy to replace, or you have to take them with you when you leave. See where I'm going with this? See how Sanderson's mind must be working and thinking, oh, they have to move the bridge. How are they going to move it? They need people to move those bridges. How awful would life be for these people who have to carry a bridge every day, or once a week or whatever. Thus is born the bridge crews, the place for the very dregs of the slaves, the ones who have nothing left to offer or hope for. The perfect place for our protagonist. And in story, we see that high princes utilize their bridge crews differently. Examples of this are how we see Dalinar choosing to use chouls instead of slaves, and we see Sadeas choosing to use his as bait. For a man with questionable scruples and a cunning mind like Sadeas, using his bridge crews as a distraction from his soldiers is the smart move, right? But it makes being in his bridge crews the worst place that a slave could find himself. And that is exactly where Caledon does find himself. When he gets to Bridge 4, he isn't given time to process what's happening to him. He's immediately thrown into his first bridge run. With no knowledge of what's happening or what's going on, he's just told to get under this bridge and go. And without even the basic gear that a bridgeman normally gets. Nothing could have impressed upon him more the hopelessness of his future and the futility of hope. Caledon already sees that people around him seem to die all the time, And now, as part of this bridge crew, it's pretty much his only reality. It's just what his life is now until he himself dies, or until he can't take it any longer and he ends it himself. To continue my theme here that Sanderson is so brilliant in his writing, part of great characterization is showing the relationship between your characters. That's part of what makes us care about characters. This is another thing that I think he does so well with Bridge 4, because at first, there is no relationship building. What do you expect when these guys are just waiting around to die? Why bother getting to know anyone around you when everything is pointless? When you know that you don't matter, you're just being used and then discarded. That is what every member of Bridge 4 faces. When Caledon looks into the darkest place in his life and then turns his back on it, he begins the slow and painful process of saving these men's hearts. Not just their lives. Yes, he wants to save their lives, but he also wants to save them from the depths of depression that he himself battles. It's not easy, and it takes everything that Kaladin has. It's a constant battle, not just against the Parshendi and the destiny of a bridgeman, which is to die, but against their own personal demons and their apathy. They are still in that dark place that Kaladin was. That place of, why bother? Nothing matters. Like pulling splinters, Kaladin, one by one, pulls up his fellow bridgemen and tries so hard to convince them that life is still worth something. He starts by asking their names, something that they don't do. But that one little step of getting to know their name, showing them that, hey, you matter to somebody, even if it's just me, is the first little step that it took to pull them up with him. He also starts trying to train them to be met with strong resistance. They don't want to train. What's the point? They're just going to die anyway. Why not make life easier on themselves and take a break more often? They also think that Kaladin is just using them to prove his own self-importance, which we know that's not what he's doing. We, as the readers, can see into Kaladin's mind and know just what he's struggling with. And we know that he's not struggling with thinking he's too important. And he proves them wrong by showing personal care for each man. It's the men who matter to him, not some sort of weird sense of prestige he could get by carrying bridges. They see Kaladin literally carry wounded men who would otherwise have been left to die. They see him spending his own hard-earned money on medicine for them, on food for the wounded men. They see him doing everything he can with no expectation of reward for himself, even being hung up in a high storm just for trying to save them. And that chapter where they're all in the chasm was such a great chapter to show their changing minds. It's this turning point for them. They're starting to view Kaladin a little differently. A few of them already did, but now as a group, they're starting to see a little more of the reality of Kaladin's true self. He's not trying to be more important. He's not trying to take charge of them so he can tell people what to do. He really does care about people. And as a crew, they have to suffer together in the chasm. They are the only ones who are in this together. And that becomes so much more apparent here. There is no one else who cares for them, or at least who seems to care for them. Not their king, not their high princes, especially not Gaz. The only one proving over and over every day that he does care about them is Kaladin. And by that example, they begin to care about each other. By the time Kaladin gets strung up in the high storm and recovers and comes out to see what's going on, he discovers that his men were able to continue without him. They continued their training. They continued caring for each other. And as this group of men continue to train together in the chasms, training with the spear, their bond still deepens. They start to form this hope that together they can actually escape. Kaladin has tried so many times to escape and free others with him. They've always failed. But now he's starting to think, maybe it'll work this time. Maybe I can actually save them. And as Kaladin watches them train, he's really impressed with their drive and their determination. And it shows him just thinking how wasted these men are on slavery and running bridges. And he wishes that they could meet their full potential. He wishes they could have a leader who could pull out the best in them and channel the potential that they have. Well, it seems to me, Kaladin, that that's exactly what you're doing. And could we just appreciate for a minute how much this group has grown together when at the end of the book, when they're at the battle at the tower, the thing that they've been hoping for, that they thought was hopeless, a chance for escape, finally presents itself, and they don't do it. They choose not to. The moment they have trained for and hoped for when there was no hope finally happens, and they choose to save other people instead. Kaladin has had so much more influence than he thought. Earlier on in the book, this would not have happened. If a chance to escape came along, they would go and they would not look back. But look at the example that they've had. Kaladin never looks out for himself. He always looks out for others. And when they see him struggling and watching Dalinar's army getting betrayed, that doesn't fly with them. That's like the worst thing that Kaladin could imagine. He himself was betrayed. That's how he got here. He is going to go in, he's going to save them, and his bridge crew, who he's been influencing all this time, is gonna go with him. I love this part of the book, when everything that's been building up in these relationships with each other pays off in this big, heroic act. These are criminals and slaves that are suddenly heroes. And speaking of character payoffs, this is something about writing that Sanderson is a big believer in, making promises to your readers and to your audience that pay off later. And he does this with Bridge 4. We see all the little things that Caledon does for his crew members that pay off later. We also see so many little details building up the relationships within this bridge crew. The reason that these books are over 1,000 pages is not just because of all the world building and magic systems. Sanderson takes his time letting us get to know his characters. I think this is part of why people get so attached to his characters. Sanderson doesn't just tell us that the members of Bridge 4 are starting to form bonds of friendship. He shows them eating stew around the fire together. He describes Rock's excitement getting a razor as a gift and his offer to shave any of the men who desire a fresh shave. We see Teft thinking he's finally found what he's been looking for in Caledon. We see Lopin having a million cousins. We see the joking, we see them depending on each other. So many little details. None of these details really matter to the plot, but they make us care about these fictional characters. It makes us root for them and want them to succeed. And when they do succeed, we care that they did. And this is just a small part of Sanderson's brilliance, the way he can make us care so much for his characters. You know, he's so good at that, he should teach a class. Oh, he does. And his videos are free on YouTube. So tell me, fellow Stormlight Archive fans, which member of Bridge 4 do you think was the most relatable? And what made you the most excited to go on and read Words of Radiance? Subscribe to my channel for more fantasy character studies, follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you next time. Bye! All that and more in today's video. Cat, you need to stop what you're doing and be quiet. Meet Luna. She's being annoying. Took my socks off. Cat has been put away.